Hey, welcome to this edition of Road Warrior. I'm your host, Grant Roberson. Now, we obviously love the bigger is better attitude, but sometimes you do have to scale it down. Now, behind me, of course, is the scaled down version, which is the 2014 Fiat 500L Trekking. Now, obviously, if you're not familiar with the Fiat, it is an overseas introduction to the American way of doing life. Now, what that means is you're going to have to take that American gas guzzler thought you have in your head, scale it down, and maybe look at fuel economy and a little bit something called compact. Now, by the numbers, the Fiat's going to measure in about 167 inches overall. Now, the wheelbase is fairly short, about 102 inches. Now, the height, of course, about 5.5 feet. Now, what I found on this vehicle, now this is the four-door, and if you've seen the commercials, they've obviously referenced this as being kind of a mirage, because when you think of Fiat, you actually maybe only think of two doors by itself. Now, when you look at this four-door model, obviously they're expanding on the bigger is better attitude. And what I do love, of course, with four doors is the ease of ingress. Now, one thing you're going to find once you climb inside this vehicle is the enormous amount of headroom. Now, for my 6-foot-plus frame, it really actually somewhat dwarfed me. It actually had kind of a cathedral feel in there, and I will get into that in just a minute. But by the numbers, really this Fiat's going to measure in kind of that compact area, of course, actually falling just a little bit short than the Porsche we just drove. Now, obviously, we want to talk about ground clearance, and what's surprising, it has fairly decent. It's about 4.7 inches, so you got just enough height. Now, what's important about that, of course, is anytime you get lower to the ground, it's really going to affect you actually getting inside. We noticed that, of course, on the Porsche, as it was mere inches. But what I like when you get inside this vehicle, it has kind of a vertical seating arrangement, so you're really just kind of easing in. Now, when you look at the tires, standard 16 inches is the key, but on this trekking model, they're going to go up to about 17-inch ones here. Now, one thing you're going to notice, now, this isn't really an off-road vehicle, but what I do like, of course, is this rubber cladding. It kind of gives it a sneaker-esque like look, but anytime you had rubber cladding like this, of course, it's going to protect the paint from scrapes. Now, if you forget that this is the 500, it's not that hard to remember because obviously it's emblazoned on the headlights, actually on the rims, and you'll find it on the seat coverings inside. Now, one thing to notice on this particular model, of course, is the yellow canary-like exterior. Now, I kind of reference it to maybe the New York taxi cabs because really I felt when I get to a stoplight, someone actually may hop inside, which actually isn't a bad idea to turn these into a kind of a company vehicle like a taxi service because it is just quirky, a nice exterior. And one thing you're going to notice really with this surrounding glass all the way around it is that aquarium-like feel. I really couldn't find a blind spot, and especially up front with that glass that really curves around. Now, in every vehicle, we talk about grille warfare, and on this one, maybe there's just not any war at all because really this gray kind of badging right here gives you more of a smile. Now, of course, that rubber cladding we talked about on the sides, really going to find it up here. Going to help, of course, that bug juice and all that jazz you get going down the road, really going to help cleaning it up. Now, one thing I did like, you'll see the lower lights down below look like typical fog lights, but actually when you turn the blinker on, it's actually going to illuminate as you get ready to turn, kind of highlighting the area, let's say, in those dark situations. Now, as for the power plant under the hood, it's going to be an inline four-cylinder 1.4 liter. Now, what that translates to is about 160 horses and 184 foot-pounds of torque. What it doesn't translate to is 0 to 60 because we really just didn't test the numbers. I would hesitate to say it's going to be quite slow. Now, if you couple this, of course, what we have here, the 6-speed manual transmission, it's not too shabby, and you're going to notice just a little bit of that kind of whine you're going to associate with the inline four-cylinder. Now, what I didn't really like was the fact that it did actually have a manual transmission. I really preferred to just have an automatic, make it a lot simpler because it's not too bad to go down the road, have a sip of coffee, and not worry about shifting the gears. Now, as for fuel economy, you're going to get around about 25 to 33 miles per gallon. Not too bad on a vehicle that, of course, looks economic and it really delivers that fuel economy. Now, I talk about all the time, and that is the new smart key systems, but here on the Fiat, it is the old traditional. Now, of course, what that means, you're going to have to walk up to it, press that old kind of painful button, and of course, when you get inside, turn it on the dash. Now, that is compared, of course, to the economic offerings like the Chevy Spark and even the Sonic that really go to the smart key systems and even that push start button. So it wouldn't hurt, of course, to find it here on the Fiat. Now, swinging around to the back, we obviously like the cargo offerings on a vehicle like this, really allowing you to have more room than you would expect. Now, swinging around here, what I do like, of course, it does have the electronic release here on the rear hatch. Now, when you look at the cargo numbers in this vehicle, it's going to be about 22 cubic feet, well more than, of course, an average sedan, and not too bad, and pretty close to maybe a modest size SUV. Now, once you actually lay down those second row seats, you're actually going to more than triple the space, around about 68 cubic feet. So it's obviously turning this vehicle into a decent hauler. Now, diving into the cargo area, one thing you're going to notice right off the bat is that you're not going to find kind of a spare tire. It's just not under the cargo area and not tucked underneath. But one thing you will find is kind of the fix a flat like system. It basically has an air pump down here. You take it out, give you a little bit more air to at least get you down the road. Now, another nice feature we found is really this rear cargo floor. You kind of pull it out and you slide it back into place. It's going to give you kind of a two-tier system. Now, there's not a lot of room here still, but it allows you maybe just to sneak things down here and add another surface right here. Now, another nice feature, of course, is this rear tonneau cover. Now, what that does is, of course, as the hatch rises, it rises and really protects things back here, giving you a little bit more security so people can't really see the items you have hidden. Now, obviously, this is a youthful-like vehicle, so it doesn't hurt to actually give the latest technology for the youth, and obviously that is Beats-like audio. Now, you may be familiar with, of course, the headphones, so putting that Beats audio in this vehicle takes it to that kind of youthful, young-like approach. Now, as for the overall ergonomics in this vehicle, one thing you're going to notice besides legroom is the cathedral-like feel in this vehicle, most notable the amount of headroom. Now, this really dwarfs anybody, especially even me at my 6-foot-like frame. Now, on this vehicle, one thing you're going to notice is that you do have the ability to adjust the seats up and down as well as forward and backwards. Now, in between the front seats here, you're going to notice this kind of modest armrest. Now, I do find that if the seat is too low, the armrest is actually too high. Now, it can tuck out of the way and can be shared with the front pilots. Now, when you swing around to the dash here, you're going to find kind of a new innovation that a lot of vehicles are going with, and that is the dual glove compartments. Now, there's one up front, really kind of going to house just some smaller items, just a nice place to tuck some things, and down below, you're going to have another traditional glove compartment down here as well. Now, when you swing over to the center, of course, this is the climate control zone, and on this particular model, it is dual up front, really dialing in the specific temperature, real easy to use. Now, down below it is some more innovations, of course, the SD card reader, USB connection, and some auxiliary jacks, really the forefront of innovations. Now, some other key features you're going to find, of course, is the gauge cluster, but you're not going to be wowed about it because pretty much it is straightforward with the old speedometer and tachometer. Now, there is a digital speed readout right there in the middle and doesn't hurt. Now, as you swing around, of course, we talked about the 6-speed manual transmission that I'm not a big fan of, but it's right here, nice and tall, so you got really good ease to get to it. Now, there is a, of course, parking brake, but it's not the old foot down here. It's actually right here underneath this armrest. So it does take a little bit of getting used to, and you actually have to pull on it fairly hard to make sure it is fully engaged. Now, swinging around to the second row, and again, that leg when we talked about earlier, that's about 36 inches and fairly average in this type of vehicle. Now, what we also like about this back seat is the ability to kind of slide it forward and backwards, just simple right here, pull it up. Now, what that helps with, of course, in this tight situation where you have an item back here and maybe you want to make your passengers a little bit less comfortable right here. Now, again, you can triple the cargo space, of course, when these second rows are folded flat. And again, that's made fairly easy. Just pull the handle here, it'll actually tumble forward. Now, I really don't need it, obviously, in this position sometimes, so actually we just ease it back and make one nice cargo floor for all your gear. That does it for this edition of Road Warrior, and our test drive behind the wheel the somewhat small 2014 Fiat 500L. Now, small is a relative term, considering, of course, this is the 4-door model, which does upsize the offering from Fiat. Now, of course, what we loved is that fuel economy and, of course, that bright yellow offering, because that doesn't hurt to maybe make a little extra money as a taxi cab. Now, I'd like to thank you for watching this edition of Road Warrior, and as always, keep both hands on the wheel and eyes straight ahead.